All right, you know what? I think we're going to jump right into this because it's Monday. I think some people are still struggling in, but the exciting thing about this webinar is for those of you who have joined us for our last few webinars, we've been diving into security. This time around, we're switching gears. We're going into something that's obviously striking a chord with a lot of folks because this is our most popular webinar so far. We got a ton of signups for it. Part of that is due to the topic, practical PowerShell for MSPs. We got a lot of good stuff you're going to learn that's going to make your day-to-day life actually easier. And I think a big chunk of it too is the guest presenter we have, Kelvin Tegelaar. I told you, Kelvin, that I was going to mispronounce your last name. You said that I was going to, and I think I probably did it. But excited to have you here.
You did it beautifully. Thank you for that amazing introduction.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, let me give you a little bit more of one because I think a lot of the folks that have come into the webinar, there's probably a lot of people from MSPs, RS, the Discord group, IT Pool Party. Those guys don't really need an intro to you because how active you are in those channels. But for the rest of everybody, Kelvin is a blogger at cyberdrain.com. He's been pumping out tons of great blog posts sharing practical PowerShell monitoring tips and tools, scripts. You can go to his blog right now. He's got a great roundup of some of the most popular blogs from the year. A lot of really good stuff there. I'm super excited that you joined us, Kelvin, and that you agreed to do this. I know everyone's going to get a lot from this. And then I also wanted to introduce AJ Singh, who's our VP of product here at Ninja. And AJ is going to be going over after Kelvin's presentation. He's going to be jumping on and showing off how you can put some of the stuff Kelvin's talking about to use in Ninja, which is really cool. And then after all that, stick around because we've got a cool slide with some additional resources that we'll share. And we'll also be answering all the questions we can. Before I kick it over to you, Kelvin, one more note about the Q&A. Like our previous webinars, we want to make this as interactive as possible. Kelvin's definitely set up his presentation that way where he's going to be going through an active live tutorial. Don't wait till the end. If you have a question, go ahead and jump on. You've got your questions panel over there and the right there with the GoToWebinar control panel you should see. Type in questions as you have them, and Kelvin's going to do his best to answer them right away. The last note I'll make is that this is being recorded, and we'll have the video and the slides, links to all the resources we discuss. Should be going out to you possibly later today, if not that, first thing tomorrow morning. So with that, Kelvin, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, cool, thanks. Well, like I said, thank you for the amazing introduction. Like Jonathan just said, my name is Kelvin Tegelaar. I just wanted to correct you because it's my name. It's important to me. No. Okay. So without jokes, we're moving on from the previous webinar session that I've given about 2 months ago. So this is pretty much just version 1.5 of that webinar. If you haven't watched it yet, please go to my blog. Little search bar there, type in webinar. You should be able to find it straight away, and it covers all the basics of PowerShell, everything from if statements, for each loops, and it all sounds very technical, but I always try to explain things with more of a system administrator mindset than just a development mindset. Because when I hear stuff like, yeah, you need to process this array and loop through the data, I panic. I mean, I'm not a developer. I have no clue on how specifically those things work in depth. And to be honest, I don't really care about it either. I just want to use my PowerShell skills in my day-to-day operations. So that's exactly what I've targeted with the previous webinar. So we're going to have a small recap about this. And after that, I'm going to move on to slightly more advanced stuff. Most of it will be error handling based. So how to use try and catch blocks. Again, sounds complex, isn't. I'll be explaining it fairly simple. We're also going to show you how to use error handling without try and catch blocks using the error action preference, as it's called. I'm going to teach everyone how to browse the registry with a PS drive, but not just the registry, also OneDrive locations. And we're also going to create a small monitoring set for Windows feature upgrades, something that's pretty popular, and I'll make sure that we'll be able to use that set in NinjaRMM, for example, or any RMM system that you'd like. So let's just jump straight into it. I have a lot of stuff prepared right here for you guys, and we're first going to just show you exactly how to use PowerShell. I've done this in the previous webinar as well, and it was very appreciated. A lot of people don't know where to start at all. One of the things that I like doing is just jumping straight into functional stuff. I want to know, hey, how am I going to get data out of PowerShell? One of the ways that you can start using PowerShell is simply right-clicking your Start button and clicking on the Windows PowerShell button. When you do that, it'll give you a little pop-up, and I'm running something as admin that I shouldn't. There, it gives you a little pop-up. It shows you something similar of a command window. It's all very simple stuff. But the moment you type ISE here, which stands for Integrated Scripting Environment, you get a little window. You get a window that has a bit more information, and it also gives you a white plane here to develop your code into it. One of the things that helps a lot is that this window also has something called the command browser. If you click here, it might take a while. It should show a little command window right there. And every command that PowerShell has available, you can find in this list. So, for example, I could type get item here, and it will show me exactly how the syntax is for get item. So moving on from that, PowerShell ISE is a very powerful development tool, and it's included in any version of Windows. It currently is in development only. So that means that, it currently is in maintenance only. PowerShell ISE is no longer being actively developed. So what you can do is start using Visual Studio Code, which is sort of the next step in the PowerShell development. The Visual Studio Code is a free download you can find online, and you can install it just as you would PowerShell ISE on any system. It also helps you with syntax highlighting, command browsing, all these things. If you're interested in that, please follow the previous webinars. We're going to be diving a bit more into code right now. So, the code. Here we have a small start with if statements, and expressions. An if statement simply means if something has happened, I want to perform another task. So in this case, I am getting a list of all processes called teams. If I would execute just a single line by right-clicking it and saying run selection, $process will contain the information about all running Teams processes on my system. So as you can see, currently I have 5 processes or 6 processes running for Teams. For example, sometimes I would like to say, hey, I want an alert if Teams is not running. So I right-click and I'm pressing run selection. And if Teams would not be running, I would get the report Teams is not running. Currently, Teams is running on my machine. So let's try to move on from that. As you can see, this and this is exactly the same, but changed for readability. You can write any if statement in this way, or by giving extra enters in this way. It doesn't matter for the execution of the code. It just depends on how you enjoy reading these items. So for example, what I really prefer doing is if I execute a single action, I write it on a single line. And if I'm going to execute multiple action, for example, I would like to write host twice. It's really not running. I try to split it across 2 lines or multiple lines. Currently, if I execute this, we'll still get the exact same result as above. As Teams is currently not running, if the process equals null, so if there is no process running, write host Teams is not running. Quite simple stuff. Now I want to actually report if Teams is running or if it isn't running. So I'm going to use the else statement. So if the $process equals null, so if there is no process running, I will report on my host Teams is not running. But if process is not null, it will say Teams is running. So we'll just select all, hit run selection, and there you'll see Teams is currently running. I am seeing some reports in the chat about audio.
Yeah, I'm seeing that as well.
Yeah,
Kelvin.
I'm not sure if that's the webinar software or if it's just glitches on your side. A recording will be available, so don't worry too much about it. Should be fine. So I'm getting some questions about, hold on, just 1 second. I saw some questions about, yeah. So if a variable is empty, you can execute something else. So if I run this part of the code, we'll see, hey, excuse me, this part of the code, you'll see, hey, Teams is currently running. That's exactly what we wanted. So an else statement means, hey, Teams is not running. Now we're going to use the variable Teams. So or the variable process in this case, process, excuse me. So if process is null, then Teams is not running. But if it is running, please tell me how many processes are running. So I'm asking process.count. So if I execute this piece of code, you'll see suddenly, hey, Teams is running, there are system diagnostic process. That's weird. You have no use for this at all. And that's due to the way PowerShell works, and you'll require something called expressions. Expressions, again, it sounds very complex, but it simply means you have to put your pieces of code in between specific highlighters. So an expression is when you use the dollar symbol plus the 2 parentheses. So if I execute this piece of the code and run selection, you'll see, hey, Teams is running, there are 5 instances. Something that's very important to note is that if I'm confusing you right now or going a little bit too fast, make sure that you go back to the previous webinar. This is just a small recap on what I covered there. I'm also going to show you how to do a for each loops, and then we're going to actually move on to slightly more advanced stuff. So if you're worried about like, hey, I'm getting behind, just watch the previous recording and then watch this one after, because it's pretty much a follow-up. Okay, so if statements are simply if something has happened, then I want to execute another action. And if it has not happened, when we're using else, I want to execute yet another action. So now we're moving on to a for each. So a for each means I'm going to execute something for each item in an array. Now, again, I said it before, I'm saying it a lot. Arrays, it all sounds very complicated. It's not. It's actually a list of items. When you hear a programmer talking about an array, it's simply, hey, this is a list of items or a list of objects. For example, a list of objects could be apple, pear, banana, all that kind of stuff. Any fruit, tomatoes, for example. So that a for each loop is executing each item in that list or executing a specific command for each item in that list. So here we're going to get a list of all processes called automation. First, we're just going to execute that in VS Code. Oh. That process automation. So if I press enter here, we'll get this list, as you can see. It's a list of information. What I'm saying right here is I want to store that list of information in dollar processes. So I'll run the selection. And again, if I type dollar processes, you get the entire list of information. So again, I'm going to show you how to execute code in 2 specific ways. These are both the same as the one above it. The only difference here is highlighting again. So where I hit enter. So now I want to do for each process. So for each process in the list of processes, I want to write, hey, a process called process name is running, and these are its handles. So I'm going to execute this. And you'll see that for each item in the list, it says, hey, a process called automation manager.scriptrunner is running. And you'll get that entire list of information. and you'll get the handles like we specified here at the end. Again, this is an expression. An expression simply means, hey, I want to use a variable inside of a string. These two pieces of code show exactly the same material. It is a little bit, oh, I actually had processes in there from a previous session. Now I actually killed each process in that list. As I said before, you can write it on a single line, you can write it on multiple lines. And there, you'll see that for each process that was running, Automation Manager, I've stopped the process, it says. So when we want to add things to a list, it's actually quite simple. First, we'll have to initiate that something is a list. A list is an array, like I said before. So here we're saying simply, list is an array. So if we run the selection, $list is completely blank, but PowerShell is aware you're going to fill it with more data. Now you can run for each process in processes, list process name. So what we're going to do is for each process, for each time Automation Manager appears in the list of processes, I want to add that name to my personal list. So if I run the selection and type lists, we'll see that only the process name is added to this. So if I type $processes, I will get all the information. But if I type $lists, I will get just the names back. So this is one of the ways of adding objects to a list. There are multiple ways that are a little bit better. Again, please watch the recap from before so you'll be able to understand it completely. I'm just going to be, I'm not going to change these. We're going to be moving on to try and catch blocks, which is something new and not treated in the previous sessions. Just a second, I'm just quickly going to change, quickly going to check the questions. So the variable name is not case sensitive. No, it's not case sensitive, and that is something good to know. I could type $lists. It's the same as $lists or $lists with a capital S. It is advised to use camel casing, as it's called. So for example, list 1, to make sure that when you use tab completion, so for example, I have the variable $list with an S, I can press tab and it will immediately show the S behind that. It's advised to always use camel casing in that case. So when you press tab, you see it's changing to the correct variable that you wanted it to change to. They are not case sensitive in any way. PowerShell is just not a case sensitive language in general. That's actually a pretty cool question. Also some questions about recommendations on the book. On books and these kind of things. At the session we'll be covering that. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to do something called try and catch blocks. Try and catch means we're going to try to execute a specific task, and if it does not work, catch the error and write something else instead of just a bland error code. We've all seen it when you make mistakes in PowerShell, that you get this wall of red text, and most of the time this wall of red text is pretty useless. It doesn't help anyone, it doesn't really explain what's going on. I mean, if you look at this, category info object not found, fully qualified error ID, command not found exception, that doesn't really help anyone. And actually PowerShell has a lot of tricks to make prettier error codes. It's just not used a lot. So we're going to start with the try and catch blocks. Try, I'm going to try to execute this, but if there is an error, I'm going to execute what is in the catch block. So here I'm going to say, I want to browse to a web page. I want to browse to example.com1. So I made a typo in there. At the moment that I execute this, you will see that instead, or at the moment that I execute this line, you will see I get that ugly red error block. Not useful for anyone. But if I execute this entire piece of code, you'll see, hey, something went very wrong. The remote name could not be resolved. Example.com1. This already is a lot better. It shows you exactly what went wrong. It does show it here, but it shows it in such an aggressive and confusing manner that most people just get confused by it. So when you use a try block, it will catch any error that is given by this command. What is very important is not all PowerShell commands give you a nice error, or sometimes they are set to silently continue. And if that is the case, they will not be caught by a catch block. So something that you always have to remember when you create a try and catch block is to add at the last part error action stop. It simply means that at the moment that you are using this piece of code, it creates a terminating error. The script would stop and the catch is then activated. So it only activates when the script is stopped for any reason. A lot of error actions are defaultly set to stop. Sometimes they're set to silently continue, and you can always experiment with your own try and catch blocks. When you execute this block, you're catching all error codes that are coming from invoke web request. So if I run this selection right now, no matter what the error code would be, for example, I could make a completely utter mistake and say, hey, I forgot the E over there. It will still catch the error. It will catch any error that's currently available. And sometimes that's not what you want. Sometimes you want to make sure that you find the error of the last, or find very specific errors, or for example, only the last error given. So we have for this the catch with small specification. For example, if I would run this piece of code where I'm saying invoke web request to example1.com, but only catch system out of memory exceptions. That means that if you execute this code, you will get this red error as long as it's not, as long as it's not the specific error code in there. So if I change this to, for example, excuse me, I copied a little bit too much code over there. Clear. Always annoying when that happens in the middle of a webinar. Okay, so currently I have no more errors. Perfect. So now I'm going to try to get the last error, and we see that is a web exception. So if I enter web exception right here, you will see that right now, hey, unable to find web exception. That is because this returned error code is not always exactly the same as the error codes that are available to the system. So a small tip that you have in VS Code is you can type web exception, and then instead of just entering typing all of web exception, click on the specific item, and it will change it to system.net web exception, so the correct error code. Right now, if you run the selection, you'll see, hey, something went very wrong instead of that entire part of code that we kept seeing right here, the red, all the evil code. I'm just going to quickly check the questions. What's the best way to manage scripts in which you run often? For example, connecting to Office 365. Okay, that's actually a very good question. So a lot of people have difficulties with running specific scripts a lot of times. For example, a good example is connecting to Office 365. There are easy solutions for that. For example, you can create your own functions. A function is a piece of code that you can call using a smaller name. I'll show that right now. So in the case of Office 365, which actually is a very good example, people connect to it a lot. We'll call our function connect Office 365. Pretty simple, right? and we are using username as a variable and $password. It's not a very good example, actually. Let me skip this for a little bit. I did treat that in the previous session. Please watch that video again. It's a little bit better to keep to the context I had for this session. So at the moment that you want to run a script a lot of times, it's best to place your functions into your PS profile. So if you type notepad PS profile, you'll find a file, and if you save this file, then it will be stored as your current profile. And at that moment, you can always reuse those functions. Okay, so let's move on with the try and catch troubleshooting. So the try blocks is something that I've handled pretty in depth now. The moment that you execute this code, you hit the run selection, you get something is very wrong instead of an ugly error code. You can change these to any exception that you like. You can find the exceptions by executing this piece of code. You can see the name is web exception. You simply type web exception in the catch blocks, and from there on, you'll be catching that information. If you want to catch all errors, you use the block above. It is not advised to always catch all errors because sometimes you want to do specific things for specific error codes. If a file is not found, you might want to create that file. So it takes a bit of playing around with that. Another one that is very important to know is the finally block. Finally always comes after the catch, if it was successful or not. So if you select all this block, you'll see I run the selection, and it says something went very wrong, and this is always executed, regardless if there is an error or not. And the script was done at this specific time. So this is actually very useful to put at the very end of your try and catch blocks, so you can make sure that you get all the information that you want. For example, at the end of your script, you often want to execute a small line of code saying, hey, the script is done running, something went wrong, and you can just make sure that at the end, you know specifically that the entire script is done. You can use multiple catches for one single action, yes. That's a bit more in depth, so that's something I'll pick up in at another time. Okay, so that's the catch, try, and finally block. Are there any more questions about that? Can you have multiple exceptions? I just answered that, yes. What directory does your PS profile need to be in? Your PS profile is actually a variable in PowerShell. You can simply put it in in the PS profile path. If you want more information about that, please Google that. That's the best way to find out how the PS profile works. What's the point of the final versus just writing unbracketed code? Let me just go back. Oh, versus just writing unbracketed code. Okay, so these are attached to each other. So you could actually have code in between here that is not related to the parts you were trying and catching. And the finally block is only executed at the very end. So you could have codes with different catches in there, for example. The PS profile is saved per computer. Something that you can do, something that I really advise you doing, is storing your PS profile in your OneDrive location or redirecting your My Documents to your OneDrive location. So you have your PS profile available on all machines where you have OneDrive available. Yeah, there's still a lot of questions about the recording. There will be recording available. Another question was if I show some code specifically for a task. I could, but that's not the point of the session. If you want to figure that out, I can send me an email, send me a tweet, and I'll try to help you out with that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some cooler stuff, and that's probably a bit more functional for everyone that hasn't watched the first session, and that is going to be PS drives. So PS drives are simply locations on your computer. So if I type get PS drive in a PowerShell prompt, you'll get a small list of locations that are available on your current computer. These are all locations that are related to a specific provider. So for example, the C location is located or is related to the file system provider. The third location is related to the circuit provider in Windows. So using PS drives, you can actually browse a lot of information. For example, you could browse the entire registry, the HKey current user or HKey local machine, simply by typing HKey CU, HKCU, enter. Oh, CD, enter. And now you're actually browsing the registry as if it is a folder structure. So it makes it very simple to browse specific PS drives, like I said. So very specific providers without having to change to, hey, I have to open regedit right now and I have to change this registry key and I have to click here and click there and click there. You can do all of this via PowerShell. So I'm also going to show you how to quickly create your own PS drive. This is a personal preference of mine. I use OneDrive a lot. Some people use Dropbox a lot. I enjoy being able to just go to my PowerShell windows and executing, hey, I want to browse my OneDrive now. So instead of typing my entire OneDrive path, I simply type cd OneDrive, and now I am in the path of my OneDrive. This user currently doesn't have a OneDrive configured, but I could make a new directory here called PowerShell. And poof, a new PowerShell directory has been created in my OneDrive folder. So I don't have to type C users presenter OneDrive each time. I just type cd OneDrive, or even better, cd OneDrive PowerShell. I thought I just created, oh yeah, cd PowerShell, of course, because we're already in the OneDrive folder. Right there. And now I'll be able to traverse it as if it's just folders, but it's actually just an alias for a shorter path. So that's a trick that you can use with your PS drive. So when you're getting the PS drive, you can get this entire list of information. This list contains the registry as well, and that's actually a pretty cool trick that a lot of people like using. We're currently looking at the HKey current user hive. So whenever you want to browse the HKey current user drive from your registry, you simply use HKCU. For example, here we're going to go to the software folder for OneDrive. If I type this piece of code right now, if I run the selection, you'll see that my path has changed. And now I can actually perform an ls or a dir, whatever you prefer. And you'll see, hey, these are the registry keys available there. So the name is 19, so a version number, and the install path is right there. And the account is last updated at the specific date. And from here, you can actually browse the entire registry all around. So it's actually very simple. Get PS drive, lists all your drive, and going to the registry simply is current directory or set location, HKey current user, double point, enter. And from there, you can browse through the entire registry. It's a cool trick that's actually used a lot in PowerShell, because you have to remember that whenever you're trying to browse files, folders, or registry keys, PowerShell just does it in the exact same way as any other application. It simply goes to a path. Using PS drive, you can discover where these specific paths are located. So a pretty cool command, get PS drive, because you immediately show where these paths are located. You'll also see, hey, what is the root of these drives currently? So for example, I've set the root of OneDrive to this, C users presenter OneDrive. But the root of HKeyLM is currently set to HKey local machine. You could change this to, for example, HKey local machine system, if you'd like. That pretty much covers PS drives. We're on the 40-minute mark, so we're right on schedule, I think. We're going to move on to error actions. So error actions for the entire script. Whenever you're using the error actions, I really advise to put it in line with the code. That simply means when I'm typing get PS drive and I want this error action to always continue without notifying me, I'll set this to silently continue. There are other ways of solving that. For example, sometimes you have scripts where you really do not want to see any error. You just want to make sure that every time an error pops up, it just keeps running. To do this, you can use this piece of code. Error action preference is silently continue. This sets the error action preference for this current session. So if I type this, run selection, you'll see that if I type incorrect commands, ger host, it will simply no longer give me an error. Of course, this can get very confusing when scripting, so I really want to urge you, if you ever want to use error action preference, silently continue, use it in situations where you are absolutely sure you do not want to see the error, where you're sure that any error means it's still continuing and there's no problems. As you can see, I purposely mistyped a command here. If I use run the selection, you will simply not get any output. But if I run correct selection, so right host is correct, it will still say silently continue. From here on, we actually have a couple of options. So the default action is always continue. It will show you an error, but the script will not break, except when there is a terminating error. And that's actually pretty cool to know. So for example, get item ctemp. Hey, as you can see, there's a folder called ctemp. A terminating error would be that the folder ctemp does not exist. It will simply give you a large error saying, hey, the folder does not exist. A non-terminating error could be, hey, I've executed getting ctemp, but I've got a permission denied. It could be a non-terminating error. So making sure, going back to our try catch blocks, we want the error action to be stop on terminating errors. So if it encounters an error, it will stop the entire script. Default, it is continue, but show me the error code. Another option you have for the error action preference is inquire. Every time an error occurs, just show me, hey, what's going on? So if I run the selection, you'll see, hey, the term right host is not recommended. What do you want to do? And here again, you get these options that I've given up here, except suspend. Suspend is a more troubleshooting method, but here I can say, you know what, just continue, and it will print the error. If I execute the same again, I can say, no, this time I want to silently continue. So this way you can make your scripts a bit more interactive, saying like, okay, hey, if it errored out, just move on. It helps for scripts that, for example, the help desk executes and they're not really sure what they're doing. They just hit F5 and from there on, you can move on. Okay, that's that part. The error action preference is actually something very simple, but also something very powerful. If you don't want to use try and catch blocks, there are cases when that happens. I advise using the silently continue parameter. Just be careful whenever you're doing that, because it can get a little bit dangerous in specific scripts. It will simply keep your scripts running for a long time. I just saw the question coming in, which IDE are you using? This is Visual Studio Code. The link is in the previous session. There is a blog in the answers somewhere up there. Whenever you get a chance, try Visual Studio Code. It's truly life-saving. It's so much better than ISE. It will really change the way you look at PowerShell. It's a much more fantastic application than just using PowerShell from a command line window. So yeah, the error action preference, that's pretty much covered. We're going to move on to monitoring the release ID of your own workstation. So this is actually a pretty cool one that a lot of people have been requesting for a long time. Microsoft has said, hey, Windows 10 is going to perpetually update everything. We're just going to have releases forever and ever. And each of these releases will have an ID. So it's actually very simple to say, hey, what is the specific release I want everyone to be on, and what is the current release, because it's posted in the registry at every update. So here we're saying our wanted release is number 1909. So then we're going to go to the registry. And here you see again, we're using that PS drive, HKey local machine. We're going to the software hive, and then we're going to the Microsoft Windows NT current version hive. There, we want to only get the item called release ID. And we want to show just the release ID, nothing else. The moment that I execute this, and I type $release ID, we'll get that number returned. So my current version is 1903. We wanted 1909. So we're going to use this if statement to give an error if it is not the current release that we want. So if we run this selection, we'll see, hey, error, the release is 1903 and we wanted 1909. But just imagine now that we just want everyone to be on 1804, for example. That's the minimum version supported right now. We want that. So if we execute all of this code, you'll see, hey, current release is 1903 and it's newer than the 1804 release. That is because here we're saying if the release, so what we're getting from the registry is less or equal than our wanted release, then we should write an error. In any other case, we write that the current release is newer than the wanted release. So it's actually a very simple monitoring set where you move on and you make sure that from here on, you grab all the information from the registry and use it in an if-else statement. That's all we're doing right here. I just saw another couple of good questions coming in. Can PS drive output to an XML file? Yes, it could. There's actually a very cool functionality. You can type get PS drive. And as you see, you have all the current PS drives. And PowerShell has the convert to functionality. So whenever you type convert to, you can see how convert to Azure Disk, convert to CSV, convert to HTML, JSON, etc., etc. You can convert any executed command to an XML drive. So this is actually a pretty simple way of processing all the information. So if we want, get PS drive and we want the XML file, we can say convert to XML and it will simply print the XML file right here. If we just want the XML outputted as a string, we say, hey, output this as a string. At the moment, it's of course not working because PowerShell is smart enough to grab XML files and place them into an array or an object as it's called. It's better to say out file c temp.xml. Oh, no. I made a little typo. We're going to browse to this folder anyway. Typos happen. And as you can see, we have temp.xml right here. And we can edit it with Notepad++. And it should open, well, the objects. Ta-da! It's as simple as that. There's a lot of other tricks that you can do. For example, you can say, hey, I only want to output this as a string. So this currently looks like it's still an array, but it's actually one big bulk of text. I'm seeing some other cool questions. Do the variables stay in memory from one PS file to another? No, and that's very important to remember. Every time you execute a PowerShell script, all of the variables just disappear. They're dumped every time. So if you want to have them available, you'll have to grab them from somewhere, for example, from a different file. What would be a real-world scenario we could use for getting info such as the release ID? Okay, so the release ID is something you want to monitor in case you have a lot of outdated machines. So a good example is Windows version 1709. It's not supported anymore right now. I'm not very sure about the version numbering, but anyway, it's very easy to retrieve the version number for an entire stack of machines and say, hey, these 10 machines have an older version of Windows. I will need to start upgrading them. That's a real world example. Oh wow, there's a lot of questions actually coming in, so I'm trying to catch up, guys. Just give me 1 minute. What action can we take when we find the wrong version of Windows installed? Yes, there is a command to upgrade, or well, to upgrade Windows, to downgrade Windows, there isn't. But there is one available on my blog. It's called Feature Update Remediation, and it will update to the latest version of Windows without rebooting the machine, giving the user the chance to reboot at the moment they'd want to. Thanks for calling it useful. That's always great to hear. Is there a way that VS Code can compile code for obfuscation? No, not really. There just isn't. There just isn't a direct way for that. I'm seeing some specific Ninja questions. I can't answer those questions. AJ in 2 minutes will be able to do that. So I think we're about done here, and I'll be handing off the presentation back to Ninja. AJ will be talking to you guys about how to use PowerShell in their product and specifically how to move on. Some other questions: how do we access your blog for the scripts to upgrade Windows? Simply go to cyberdrain.com. If you guys have any more questions, just keep them rolling in. I will answer them as AJ takes care of his part of the presentation. So I guess, AJ, it's your turn.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelvin.
No
That
problem.
was very helpful. Awesome. So let me make myself the presenter.
Yeah, cool.
I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So hi, everyone. My name is AJ. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Ninja, just a few words about us. So Ninja is a SaaS-based multi-tenant RMM platform. We can manage and monitor your Windows devices, your laptops, desktop servers, your Macintosh machines, your networking gear. So routers, switches, firewalls, printers, even your websites, DNS records, and whatnot. There's a lot more to us. uh, Today we have almost 3,500 MSPs and IT managers across, throughout the world who use our platform to run their business. We have offices in San Francisco and Florida, that's in the US. And outside of US, we have an office in Berlin. So this will help us give you the best sales and support coverage no matter where you're located. We offer free and unlimited use support and training. And our tool is known for a really slick and easy to use interface. With all that being said, let's dive right into the topic. So Ninja provides you two ways to use PowerShell. One is by using the command line, or should I say the PowerShell command line. And the second way is using a script library. So let's take a look at the first one first. With our last release that went out a few weeks ago, we added this right here. So earlier you could do it through the CLI, but now we have a freestanding PowerShell prompt here, which I can log in as the system user or as the currently logged in user. So I'm going to pick the latter. And here you go, I'm logged in. So this gives you pretty much the same experience as you were sitting on the machine. Just let's try a few commands. Just going to do a dir, keep it simple. I can also do a break. I can press this and it's going to break the command. I can also do a Control-C if I wanted to. Let's try do this. So this is to show you how real-time this prompt is. You saw I typed a ping command and I made it to run in a loop, and it's running in a loop as you can see. So I'm going to do a Control-C to break this. I can also copy the contents or actually download this as a text file first of all. So this gives me a record of all that I've done and what was the corresponding output of all the commands that I ran. And I could also copy it to clipboard. So I hit this button and then it's copied to clipboard. Now let's show you one more cool thing. So I'm going to go into program files. This also supports tab browsing, by the way, just the way it supports on your regular machine. So press enter. Let's go to the FAR manager folder and let's type in FAR. As you can see, we launched the FAR manager, which lets you interact with your screen via a keyboard or a mouse. So this is how, should I say, how well baked our PowerShell console is, within the Ninja interface. So I'm going to close this out. Now let's take a look at the script library. Configuration scripting. And this is where our script library resides. I'm going to actually clear this. There's quite a few pre-baked scripts that we provide to you out of the box, and you can obviously create your own. Ninja supports all popular scripting languages ranging from PowerShell, VBScript, JavaScript, Batch, and CMD files. So let's bring up the one that I had prepared for this demo. So this is to download a file from the internet to a specific folder on a machine. So I open the script. This is a WYSIWYG. Shows you all the color codings for the different variables, so it makes it really easy to read the script. You provide the script a name here, any description, just to help out the other technicians what the script is supposed to do, what category it belongs to. So here are quite a few different categories, or you could add your own categories as well. Here's where you pick the language, and as I mentioned, all the different languages that we support out of the box. Which operating system is the is the script meant for? Is it Windows or Mac? Since it is Windows, it's already locked. I cannot change it at this point. And the architecture support. So we can also have different scripts for different architectures, be it 32 or 64-bit. And towards the end, you can add parameters. So what this is doing is we have specified a URL parameter with this MSI, and then we've added another variable output as Viper av.exe. And this is where the magic happens. And here is where we specify also the time that it takes to execute the script. So let's actually play with it. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to do it real time. So let's go to my test machine. I'm also going to launch TeamViewer so we can see this in action. It's taking a little longer than usual. Of course, it's a demo. Let's try this again, actually. For some odd reason, the prompt didn't come up. There you go. Open TeamViewer. Oh, it was probably cached from the previous time. Okay, cool. And I'm expecting it to pop up right here. All right, let's try another way. We'll do Splashtop maybe. And Ninja provides you multiple ways to connect to a machine, just so you know. There's TeamViewer, there's Splashtop, there's also the remote RDP protocol, which is a Microsoft standard. Okay, I'm gonna minimize this. So let's close this out, and I'm actually gonna drag it on the side so that we can see both of them side by side. Click on the play button, go to script library. I'm gonna search for this download script. And I'm going to run this as a system user, or you know what? Let's run this as a currently logged in user. And here, if there were any parameters, I could do that as well. I could pick them right here. Let's hit apply. It wants to confirm if I want to run it on one machine. And in a moment, actually, let's bring up this folder, tools folder. I'm expecting to see a file called Viper av.exe saved here. So I've seen it takes about 6 seconds. I'm going to close this. There you go. The file disappeared. And that's how simple it is to run a script and see the output real time. Actually, there's one more fun command we could try just for kicks. So if I go to PowerShell as current user, I'm actually going to minimize this one. And let's do a start process. Let's do C drive, Windows, notepad.exe. Oh, I got to spell it better. Start process, C drive, Windows. There you go. You saw the notepad just appeared on the actual machine. Let's also try killing this. So I just did a tab browsing. I can do a process name, notepad, press enter, boom, it's gone. So just wanted to show you how efficient and how quick the agent is in terms of executing the commands that are sent over to it. So I believe that brings us, or brings me especially, towards the end of what I had to showcase. Let's actually bring up a couple of slides, because that's where Kelvin's information is, or actually this is a slide where we're actually going to showcase what are great resources for you to learn about PowerShell. Jonathan, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, sure. And AJ, actually, before you're off the hook, we got a bunch of questions as you were talking, as we expected,
Okay.
about Ninja. And so I think you may be able to see those as well. But I can tease them up for you if you'd like as well.
Oh, let me take a look. Give me one moment.
Yeah, some of these are questions about basically what we saw from Kelvin and applying it into NinjaRMM as well. I'm seeing about a handful of questions specifically. One really quick one right off the bat. Do all installs have to be an MSI?
Do we, sorry, is it a question about Ninja?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, sorry. Sure. So yeah, I believe you can. Yeah, I think MSI is the default one that we support. It's been so long since we touched that piece, but I can get back to you if we support an exe as well. But those
Okay.
would be the only two formats that we support in the install application mode. So it's a little ambiguous here, right? Because when you say all installs, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I know you'll have to go back on there.
Right.
Another thing is that might not be directly Ninja related, but you can use PowerShell to silently install the exe installers as well. So you would just run a PowerShell script instead of just downloading the file and executing it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelvin.
Yeah,
All
AJ,
right.
here's unless you would like to go through them, I've got one more I could tee up for you.
Sure. I'm looking at one more, which is, does NinjaRMM has any solutions for SharePoint online, specifically permission management? I believe there's none as of now. I can check with my developers if there's any quick workarounds, but yeah, not that I'm aware of. Another one that I'm seeing here is there a way to batch run PowerShell commands on all devices at once? I would say the best way to do that would be using a script library. If you already knew the commands that you want to run, you could probably put them in a single file as a script and then execute that against all those devices let's actually take a look. I'm gonna close the questions panel. So you go to the search tab and you select multiple devices. And then if these devices were of the same type, let's say they were all like Windows machines, the run button will appear here. Then you go to the script library, you pick the right script, hit apply, and it will prompt you that, hey, do you want to run this machine script against X number of machines? And the moment you hit yes, it will execute them across all those devices. Right, let me expand the questions panel again. Is there a minimum version of PowerShell needed for NinjaRMM? I believe not, because all we're doing is we are leveraging the endpoints built-in PowerShell module. So as long as it supports the commands that you are issuing, there should not be a problem. There's another question which I saw. Can NinjaRMM run scripts from the library under the user and or system context? Yes, apologies. Yes, that is totally possible. I also showed in my demo, when you run a script, at the top, there's two things you can pick. First of all, any parameters. And secondly, the user context you want to use to run that script. By the way, there's another feature that we introduced in our prior release to the previous one, which was a concept of a credential exchange. So you can also run a script using any credentials that you want to, not just the system or the currently logged in user. So that gives you complete control. Does NinjaRMM support PowerShell on non-Windows platforms? I do not think so. So Ninja agent requires Windows or Mac today. We also have a Linux agent in the works, but that's the extent of the devices that we can support. And also, I mean, again, PowerShell, I believe. I mean, I didn't even know PowerShell can be run on non-Windows machines. So, yep. I mean, that's my answer. Like, yeah, Windows will be the only one that will support today. Jonathan, I don't think so. I see any other questions for Ninja.
Okay, yeah, well, if we're gonna be around for a couple more minutes, guys, I know we're just after 2 here, but we are going to highlight a few different additional list of resources, and also if you have any additional questions, going back to Kelvin too, he's sticking around for a few minutes too. Cool, so thank you guys, and I just wanted to, actually, I'm going to kick this back over to Kelvin again, because as part of this, I asked him to share, one common question: where else can we go to find additional information? And Kelvin, being the PowerShell Prometheus, the Lumiere in the darkness, he gave us some additional resources that we can check out. I don't know if you want to speak to any of these, Kelvin.
Yeah, absolutely. So Learn PowerShell in 1 month of lunches is a great resource. Anyone that wants to pick up PowerShell and actually really use it, and not just use it as a development tool, but really use it in your day-to-day, pick up the book. It really takes half an hour a day to get enough basic PowerShell knowledge and just, yeah, sort of launch your PowerShell career a bit more. Next to that, for MSPs especially, Elliot Monroe's blog. Elliot is called FBS Australia, FBS OW on Reddit. Yeah, he's just generally a great guy, has a lot of Office 365 resources that you can use. He's even won some awards for some of his scripts. So it's generally it's a pretty good resource for MSPs to learn more about PowerShell, and specifically PowerShell for the cloud. Bradley Wyatt's blog is also pretty cool. Bradley calls himself the lazy administrator, and for example, his user creation tool is something that's extremely useful for pretty much everyone in the MSP world. Next to that, if you truly are a PowerShell diehard, or you really like going to Twitch, you don't have cable TV anymore, Tyler Leonhardt is a streamer that actually is a developer of PowerShell itself, and he answers questions, does Let's Script sessions. So for example, you can ask like, hey, I wonder how this and this would go in PowerShell, and he will actually guide you through it. And last but especially not least is TechSnips. TechSnips is a website where you can find small video tutorials for PowerShell. For example, how do I use PowerShell to access Azure? How do I use PowerShell to connect to Office 365? But also the more simple stuff. How do I use PowerShell to delete a file? Everything can be found in video tutorial format right there. So yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, great. And AJ, oh yeah, and so this is how we stay in touch, right? Kelvin, you've been kind enough to give all of your information here.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone just wants to send me an email or tweet me or anything like that, just hit me up. I'm absolutely okay with that. And my blog is at cyberdrain.com. It contains a lot of MSP resources. I'm pretty sure that all of you will be able to use at least parts of it in NinjaRMM.
Very nice. And you can see, of course, over here on the right, if you're interested in seeing Ninja, that's where you go to check out a free trial or just learn more about the product. And then also we have a new newsletter, and Kelvin took over it this week. He shared all the resources that we just shared with you. The whole idea is that each week every Monday you get an email. There's 5 new resources for you guys, and the emphasis, just like this webinar, what I think is so cool about the way Kelvin approaches things is there's a big emphasis on making it practical. What stuff that you can actually use is actually going to be meaningful for you guys. So just going back, some other questions about the recording. Right after this is over, we're basically going to get the recording from GoToWebinar, and then we're going to be shooting that out along with these slides, so you'll have all the links and all that good stuff. So hopefully everybody will be getting that in just a little bit later today. A few more questions that came in. Kelvin, are you able to stick around for a couple more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I did see a couple of additional ones that came on there, not Ninja specific. Let's see.
I thought I pretty much covered them all.
Okay, gotcha. AJ, switching back over to the Ninja specific ones. As you've been looking at these, are there any that came in just in the last couple of minutes that you weren't able to address before?
Let's take a look.
We've got one here. It says, when it comes to Ninja and JavaScript support, what does that entail on the client side? Node.js?
That's a good question. I'll have to get back to you. I'm not a developer, forgive me, but I can get you that question answered. I'm looking at the last one. So there's a question about how Ninja handles PowerShell, specifically wanting to run scheduled tasks. Right now, we are configuring scheduled tasks on end user machines using the Windows Task Scheduler. That then writes a specific Windows event that is finally listened by Ninja as a condition. Is there a more elegant way to create individual schedules on end users as opposed to scheduling to a group of devices or group of clients? I believe no, that's not the case. Yeah, today, I mean, yeah, I think the way you're doing it is the way that we also recommend. Based upon, I believe, the event ID, example would be like event ID 4624 or 4625, I believe, is the one that triggers when a user logs in. So you can use that then in Ninja's, conditions framework, and then trigger an action based upon seeing that event ID. So, yep, that's the best way today. But I believe that's all I see.
One thing I'll mention that came up, I dropped this in the chat. One thing in the lead up to the webinar, we got a nice suggestion that we share with folks. There's a GitHub. First of all, there's a Ninja RMM best practices group on Facebook. Where it's all Ninja customers. We actually don't manage that group. It's all Ninja customer run. And they're sharing tons of stuff. It's where you can ask any kind of questions. People are sharing good advice and tips and things like that, workarounds. And they also are managing a GitHub that contains a bunch of scripts that people are using. And there was an active suggestion that anyone who's interested in helping them moderate that and maintain it, that would be very welcome. So we can share those links for you guys too.
Cool. I always love these GitHub names. It's always ridiculous stuff. It's like Jigerman, Flugelhorn. It's insane.
Yeah, and then AJ, I'm not sure if you covered this before, but there was just some questions since Mac came up about updates on Mac and them not being available, which I believe is the case, right? Any word on anything else to say on that?
Updates on Mac not being available. I believe what you mean is Mac OS patching. So that is actually going to be tackled in our Jan release. What we'll be doing is we'll be providing you about 5 to 6 different scripts that will be leveraging the command software update on your Mac machines, and they'll give you different permutations, and you can then schedule them to update your Mac.
All right. Well, guys, I mean, I'm not seeing a bunch of new questions coming in. I'm seeing a lot of awesome comments and a lot of good words for you, Kelvin. And I just wanted to thank you again for coming in. This was fantastic. Obviously, from the comments, people are getting some good immediate takeaways here. So thanks again for doing this.
Cool, no problem. And yeah, if you ever have another one about PowerShell, I'll be glad to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, clearly this is a great topic, and Again, I just wanted to point people back to Kelvin's blog, Cyber Drain. Right now, he's got a great post that kind of walks back through the last year, all the stuff that he's been working on. A lot of cool stuff, the whole series around monitoring and everything. And sign up for the newsletter. We'll keep you posted for other webinars we do like this, and share any kind of great new blogs, new tools. As we find them, we're going to share them with you guys too. So sign up if you get a chance. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. And I do see if there's any other questions that come in that we can't cover here, feel free to write back. You've got Kelvin's email address right there on the slide. You also have this invite email that you got from me. Feel free to send over a question. I'll get it to the right person, and we'll try to get you an answer. But in the meantime, thanks, everyone, and happy holidays. Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Kelvin.
Thanks, guys.
Have a nice day. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.